At 9:47 p.m. on a Friday night in Los Angeles, the temperature still held at 73 degrees Fahrenheit. Unseasonably warm even for late September 1988. The city sprawled beneath a haze of streetlights and smog, home to 3.4 million people living their separate, anonymous lives. In the Miracle Mile district, neon signs flickered against darkening skies, casting pink and blue shadows across cracked sidewalks still radiating the day's heat. Matthew Chase, 22 years old, stood at an ATM outside a Bank of America branch on Wilshire Boulevard, his lean frame illuminated by the machine's harsh fluorescent glow. He wore a white t-shirt and faded jeans, his dark hair falling across his forehead as he punched numbers into the keypad. Behind him, grainy surveillance cameras recorded everything in silent, jerky frames, 12 frames per second, black and white, the image quality of a nightmare half remembered. At 9:48 p.m., a second figure entered the frame. The man was stocky, powerfully built, wearing a dark jacket despite the warmth. He stood close, too close, to Matthew's left shoulder, leaning in as if reading the screen. Matthew's body language shifted. His shoulders tensed. He turned his head slightly, said something. The stocky man didn't move away. For 43 seconds, both men remained at the ATM, their interaction captured in those stuttering, grainy images that would be analyzed 10,000 times over the next 3 decades. By 9:50 p.m., both men walked out of frame together, heading east on Wilshire Boulevard. The camera recorded empty sidewalk after that, just the ATM screen glowing blue in the darkness, waiting for the next customer. Matthew Chase was never seen alive again. What happened in those missing hours between 9:50 p.m. on September 23rd and the morning of September 24th, when Matthew failed to show up for his shift at the auto parts store where he worked? What words were exchanged at that ATM? And who was the stocky man whose face remained forever turned away from the camera, as if he knew exactly where not to look? Subscribe to stay with us as we uncover the 30-year journey to answer these questions. A journey that would end not in a courtroom, but in a coroner's report, with justice delivered to a dead man. Matthew Chase wakes at 7:15 a.m. on September 23, 1988, in the small apartment he shares with his older brother, Derek, in Koreatown. The apartment is modest. 2 bedrooms, thin walls, the perpetual smell of kimchi from the restaurant downstairs. Matthew has lived in Los Angeles for 14 months, having moved from Bakersfield after graduating from a technical college with a certificate in automotive repair. His mother, Ellen Chase, would later describe him as careful with money, responsible, never late for work. He calls her every Sunday without fail. This morning, Matthew eats cereal standing at the kitchen counter, writes a note for Derek, who works nights, borrowed your wrench set, Matt, and leaves for his shift at Pep Boys on Vermont Avenue at 7:52 a.m. His supervisor, Carl Mendoza, clocks him in at 8:04 a.m. On time, like always, Mendoza would tell detectives weeks later. Matt wasn't the type to just disappear. The day passes in routine. Oil changes, brake pad replacements, customer complaints about rattling exhaust pipes. Matthew eats lunch at 12:30 p.m. A turkey sandwich he brought from home, sitting on the curb behind the store where mechanics take their breaks. A coworker, James Liu, remembers Matthew seemed normal, maybe a little quiet, but Matt was always quiet. At 5:47 p.m., Matthew's shift ends. He clocks out, walks 3 blocks to the bus stop on Vermont, and boards the number 204 heading west. Security footage from the bus, another camera, another grainy record, shows Matthew taking a seat near the back, staring out the window. He gets off at Wilshire and Western at 6:23 p.m. Here, the trail fragments. A woman named Rosa Delgado, who worked at a liquor store on the corner, would later tell police she saw a young man matching Matthew's description walking east on Wilshire around 6:45 p.m., carrying what looked like a paper bag. He wasn't in a hurry, she said, just walking, like he had somewhere to be but wasn't worried about getting there. At 7:30 p.m., Matthew calls his mother from a payphone. The call lasts 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Ellen Chase remembers the conversation clearly. Matthew asked about his younger sister's birthday next month, mentioned he was saving money to visit home for Thanksgiving, complained mildly about traffic. He said he was going to grab dinner, maybe see a movie, Ellen recalls. He sounded fine, normal, like every other call. It was the last time she heard his voice. Between 7:34 p.m. and 9:47 p.m., 2 hours and 13 minutes. Matthew's movements remain unknown. No witnesses, no receipts, no surveillance footage. He simply exists as a gap in the city's vast, indifferent documentation of its citizens. Then, at 9:47 p.m., he appears at that ATM on Wilshire Boulevard in the Miracle Mile district, roughly 1.8 miles from where he made the phone call. And he is not alone. The Bank of America ATM surveillance system uses a Panasonic WV-3240 camera mounted above the machine, angled downward to capture both the user and anyone standing nearby. The system records continuously onto VHS tape, replacing footage every 72 hours unless flagged for retention. This footage was flagged. Detective Raymond Bosch, 38, head of the LAPD's West Bureau Homicide Unit, would watch these 43 seconds of footage hundreds of times. Later, he would describe it as the most frustrating piece of evidence I've ever seen. It shows us everything and nothing. Frame by frame, this is what the camera captures. 9:47 and 3 seconds p.m. Matthew Chase enters frame from the right. Approaching the ATM, he inserts his card. The machine's screen illuminates his face. Young, clean-shaven, unremarkable. He appears relaxed. 9:47 and 15 seconds p.m. Matthew begins entering his PIN. His fingers move deliberately across the keypad. 9:47 and 41 seconds p.m. A second figure enters frame from the left. Male, stocky build, approximately 5 feet 9 inches tall, wearing a dark bomber jacket and jeans. His head is angled downward, face obscured by the camera angle and the bill of a baseball cap. He positions himself directly behind Matthew's left shoulder, within inches. 9:47 and 49 seconds p.m. Matthew's head turns slightly toward the stocky man. His mouth moves one word, maybe two. A question. The stocky man doesn't step back. His right hand comes up, pointing at the ATM screen. He appears to be speaking. 9:48 and 2 seconds p.m. Matthew's shoulders tense visibly. He turns his body more fully toward the man, his hands still on the ATM. The stocky man leans closer. Matthew's free hand comes up, palm out, a gesture that could be defensive or placating or both. 9:48 and 17 seconds p.m. The transaction completes. Matthew takes cash from the dispenser. The receipt shows a withdrawal of $60. He removes his ATM card. The stocky man remains close, his hand now resting on Matthew's shoulder. Could look friendly from a distance. From certain angles, it could look like a threat. 9:48 and 31 seconds p.m. Both men turn away from the ATM, moving together toward the edge of the frame. The stocky man's hand is still on Matthew's shoulder, guiding him. Matthew is not resisting, but his body language suggests compliance rather than companionship. 9:48 and 46 seconds p.m. They exit the frame, walking east on Wilshire Boulevard, side by side. Matthew's hands are in his pockets. The stocky man's face never once turns toward the camera. Not once. 9:50 and 12 seconds p.m. The ATM is accessed again. The stocky man returns, alone, and inserts a card. Matthew's ATM card. The machine asks for a PIN. The stocky man enters the correct numbers on his first attempt. He withdraws $200, the maximum allowed in a single transaction. He takes the cash, removes the card, and walks out of frame heading east. Matthew Chase is not with him. The camera records empty sidewalk for the next 7 hours. Derek Chase wakes at 6:30 a.m. on September 24th to find Matthew's bedroom door open, the bed unslept in. This is unusual. Derek works the overnight shift at a printing plant in Burbank, leaving the apartment at 9 p.m. and returning around 6 a.m. Normally, Matthew is already up by then, making coffee, getting ready for his morning shift. The apartment is silent. Derek checks the bathroom, the kitchen, even peers out the window to see if Matthew's bicycle is chained to the railing downstairs. It is. Matthew's keys hang on the hook by the door. His wallet is gone. He would have taken that to the ATM, but everything else suggests he intended to return home. At 7:45 a.m., Derek calls Pep Boys. Carl Mendoza answers. "Matt there?" Derek asks. Mendoza says no, Matthew hasn't arrived for his 8 a.m. shift. "That's not like him," Derek says. Mendoza agrees. They decide to wait 1 hour. By 9 a.m., Matthew still hasn't appeared or called. Derek contacts their mother in Bakersfield. Ellen Chase immediately feels the cold finger of dread. "Matthew was responsible," she tells detectives later. "If he was going to be late, he called. If he was going to stay somewhere overnight, he called. Always." At 10:47 a.m., Derek Chase files a missing person report at the LAPD's Wilshire station. The intake officer, Sergeant Maria Huerta, asks the standard questions. Recent arguments, financial troubles, girlfriend problems, drug use, mental health concerns. Derek answers no to everything. Matthew was stable, employed, saving money, planning to visit home for the holidays. He had no reason to just leave, Derek insists. Sergeant Huerta explains that most missing adults return within 48 hours. Matthew is 22, legally an adult, not considered high risk. "We'll keep a record," she says. "Call us if he shows up." Derek calls Matthew's friends, a short list. Nobody has seen him since his shift ended the previous afternoon. He calls the hospitals. Nothing. He drives to the apartment of a girl Matthew had dated briefly 2 months ago. She hasn't heard from him in weeks. By midnight on September 24th, 24 hours since Matthew was last seen, Derek sits alone in their apartment, staring at the phone, willing it to ring. It doesn't. On September 25th, 48 hours missing, Ellen Chase drives the 110 miles from Bakersfield to Los Angeles. She brings a recent photograph of Matthew, his technical college graduation portrait, where he's wearing a button-down shirt and an uncertain smile. She returns to Wilshire Station and insists on speaking to a detective. Detective Raymond Bosch takes the case on September 26th, 72 hours after Matthew vanished. Bosch is a 15-year veteran of the LAPD, pragmatic and methodical. A man who keeps detailed notes in a spiral-bound notebook that never leaves his jacket pocket. He interviews Derek, Ellen, Carl Mendoza, James Liu. He retraces Matthew's route from work to the bus stop, from the bus to Wilshire Boulevard. On September 27th, reviewing Matthew's bank records, Bosch notices something. 2 ATM withdrawals on the night of September 23rd. One at 9:48 p.m. for $60. Another at 9:50 p.m. for $200. Both from the same Bank of America location on Wilshire Boulevard in the Miracle Mile district. Bosch requests the surveillance footage. On September 28th, he watches the tape. He watches it again and again. He sees Matthew Chase at the ATM. He sees the stocky man approach. He sees them leave together. He sees the stocky man return alone and use Matthew's card. Detective Bosch leans back in his chair, the fluorescent lights of the Detective Bureau humming overhead. He has a suspect now. A faceless, nameless figure in a dark jacket and baseball cap. A man who knew Matthew's PIN, who walked away with Matthew's ATM card, who withdrew Matthew's money. A man who, somehow, convinced Matthew Chase to hand over his card and PIN, or took them by force, and then vanished into the sprawling anonymity of Los Angeles. "We need to find this guy," Bosch says aloud to the empty room. But first, they need to find Matthew. On the morning of September 29, 1988, the Los Angeles Police Department launches an official search for Matthew Chase. The case is classified as suspicious missing person, an adult male who disappeared under unusual circumstances, last seen with an unidentified individual, his ATM card used without authorization after he vanished. Detective Bosch coordinates the effort from Wilshire Station. The temperature climbs to 81 degrees Fahrenheit by 10 a.m., the air heavy and still. Los Angeles in late September feels like a held breath, waiting for the season to change, for the rains to come, for something to break the monotonous heat. The search focuses on a 2-mile radius around the Bank of America ATM on Wilshire Boulevard. Patrol officers canvass the area on foot, showing Matthew's graduation photo to shopkeepers, gas station attendants, late-night workers. Have you seen this man? Last seen Friday night around 10 p.m. Most people shake their heads. A few study the photo carefully, wanting to help, but memory is a fog. Friday night, 10 p.m., a week ago. It blurs into every other Friday night. One man who works at a 24-hour diner on Fairfax remembers maybe seeing someone who looked like that, but he can't be sure. Lots of young guys come through here, he says. Detective Bosch establishes a timeline map on a corkboard in the Detective Bureau. Red pins mark Matthew's confirmed locations. His apartment in Koreatown, Pep Boys on Vermont, the bus stop, the payphone where he called his mother, the ATM. Between the payphone at 7:34 p.m. and the ATM at 9:47 p.m., there are no pins, just a gap of 2 hours and 13 minutes, a blank space where Matthew's life continued unrecorded. On September 30th, Bosch holds a press conference. Local news stations send cameras. The Los Angeles Times sends a reporter. Bosch stands at a podium, the surveillance still image projected on a screen behind him. Matthew Chase at the ATM, the stocky man partially visible behind him. We are asking for the public's help, Bosch says, his voice flat and professional. Matthew Chase, 22 years old, has been missing since September 23rd. He was last seen at this location, he points to the screen, in the company of this unidentified male. If anyone recognizes this individual or has information about Matthew's whereabouts, please contact the LAPD immediately. The press conference runs on the 6 p.m. news. The image of Matthew and the stocky man flashes across thousands of television screens throughout Los Angeles County. The LAPD tip line receives 43 calls that evening. 41 are dead ends, people who think they maybe saw something or want to help but have no real information, or have theories about alien abductions and government conspiracies. 2 calls are worth following up on. Call number 1. A woman named Patricia Vance who lives in an apartment building 3 blocks east of the ATM. She was walking her dog around 10 p.m. on September 23rd and remembers seeing 2 men standing by a dark car. Looked like they were arguing, but I didn't think much of it. She can't describe the men clearly. The car was dark, maybe blue, maybe black. I'm sorry, she says. It was dark, and I wasn't really paying attention. Call number 2. A man who refuses to give his name but says he saw a heavy-set guy in a bomber jacket at a bar on La Brea Avenue that same night, sometime after 11 p.m. He was drinking alone, seemed agitated, kept checking his watch. The caller hangs up before providing more details. Bosch dispatches officers to both locations. Patricia Vance repeats her statement but can't add anything specific. The bar on La Brea has 100 customers on a Friday night. The bartender doesn't remember anyone matching the description. By October 2nd, the search expands. LAPD cadets and volunteer groups organize a ground search of the Miracle Mile area, checking alleys, vacant lots, dumpsters behind shopping centers. They find nothing related to Matthew Chase. They find the usual detritus of urban life. Empty bottles, discarded clothing, the sleeping nests of homeless individuals who scatter at their approach. Ellen Chase stays in Los Angeles, sleeping on Derek's couch, unable to return to Bakersfield while her son remains missing. She prints 500 flyers with Matthew's photo and the text. Missing, Matthew Chase, 22. Last seen September 23, 1988. Please call LAPD. She staples them to telephone poles, tapes them to bus stop shelters, hands them to strangers on the street. Her hands develop blisters from the stapler. She doesn't stop. Detective Bosch works 18-hour days. He enhances the ATM surveillance footage, sending it to the LAPD's Technical Investigation Division to see if they can sharpen the image of the stocky man's face. They cannot. The camera angle, the poor resolution, the man's deliberate positioning, all conspire to keep his identity hidden. The best enhancement shows only shadows where his features should be. Bosch interviews Matthew's coworkers again, digging deeper. Had Matthew mentioned feeling followed or worried about anything? No. Had he mentioned lending money to anyone or owing money? No. Did he have any connections to gangs, drugs, criminal activity? Matt. James Liu laughs bitterly. Matt was the straightest guy I knew. He fixed cars and saved money. That was his life. By October 8th, 2 weeks missing, the case begins to feel cold. The news cycle moves on. A fire in Pasadena. A corruption scandal at City Hall. The Dodgers in the playoffs. Matthew Chase's face disappears from television screens. The tip line stops ringing. Ellen Chase sits in Wilshire Station on October 10th. Her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "You have to keep looking," she tells Bosch. "He's out there somewhere. He has to be." Bosch promises he will. But privately, he knows the statistics. Adults missing more than 2 weeks are rarely found alive. The stocky man at the ATM is their only lead, and he is a ghost, present in 43 seconds of surveillance footage and nowhere else. "Where are you, Matthew?" Bosch whispers to the photograph on his desk. The photograph doesn't answer. On the morning of February 17, 1989, nearly 5 months after Matthew Chase disappeared, a surveyor named Kenneth Marks hikes into the scrubland of the San Gabriel Mountains, 43 miles northeast of downtown Los Angeles. Marks is conducting a land survey for a proposed housing development near the town of Azusa, walking the perimeter of a property that abuts the Angeles National Forest. The temperature is 58 degrees Fahrenheit, unseasonably cool, the sky overcast. Marks walks through low brush and scattered oak trees, following a gully where winter rains have carved temporary streams into the earth. At 9:32 a.m., he stops. There is a smell, faint but unmistakable. Anyone who has encountered it before recognizes it immediately, the smell of decomposition. Marks follows the scent uphill, toward a cluster of manzanita bushes growing dense and wild. 50 feet from the gully, partially concealed beneath branches and a scattering of leaves, he sees fabric. Blue denim. Mark steps closer, then stops abruptly. He sees bones, white, picked clean by animals and weather. He sees a skull, tipped sideways, the jaw hanging open as if in silent scream. Kenneth Marks backs away carefully, returns to his truck, and calls 911 at 9:47 a.m. Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies arrive at 10:35 a.m., followed by the medical examiner's office at 11:20 a.m. The location is outside LAPD jurisdiction. This is county territory. Detective Bosch will not hear about the discovery until the following day, when a dental records match confirms the identity. The body is that of Matthew Chase. The medical examiner, Dr. Susan Ng, conducts the field examination on-site before the remains are transported to the coroner's facility. The body is in an advanced state of decomposition, mummified by the dry mountain air and scavenged by animals. Clothing is mostly intact. Blue jeans, white t-shirt, one sneaker still on the left foot. The right sneaker is missing, probably carried off by coyotes. Doctoring photographs everything, makes detailed notes. The skeleton is articulated, the bones remain roughly in anatomical position, suggesting the body was not moved after death. The skull shows a single round entrance wound in the occipital bone at the base of the skull, with a larger exit wound through the right frontal bone above the eye orbit. Gunshot wound. Doctoring notes into her handheld recorder. Small caliber, likely .22 or .25. Entry at the back of the head. Exit through the front. Execution style, positioning. No bullet is found at the scene. The exit wound and the decomposition mean the projectile could be anywhere within a 50-foot radius, buried in soil or carried away by scavengers. Deputies conduct a cursory search of the immediate area, using metal detectors, but find nothing. Matthew's wallet is gone. His watch is gone. His ATM card, never recovered. The only personal items found are his clothing and a single key on a small ring in his front pocket. The key to his apartment in Koreatown, where he never returned. On February 18th, Detective Bosch drives the 43 miles to the Azusa crime scene. Yellow tape flutters in the wind. The manzanita bushes rustle. The mountains rise in the distance, indifferent and ancient. Bosch stands where Matthew Chase's body was found, staring at the disturbed earth, the scattered leaves, the chalk outline where the skeleton lay. Why here? Bosch asks aloud. The mountains don't answer. The location is remote but accessible. A dirt fire road runs within a quarter-mile, used by forestry services and recreational vehicles. Someone with local knowledge could drive close, park, carry or drag a body into the brush, and be gone in minutes. At night, with no moon, it would be invisible. Bosch photographs the scene from multiple angles, walks the perimeter, notes the distance from the nearest residence, 3.2 miles, and the nearest major road, State Route 39, 1.7 miles. This was a dump site, not a murder site. Matthew was killed elsewhere, probably in Los Angeles, probably within hours of his disappearance, and his body transported here to decompose in silence. Dr. Eng's autopsy report, completed on February 21st, confirms the cause of death. Single gunshot wound to the head, small caliber firearm, distance of less than 3 feet, based on powder residue traces detected on remaining tissue. Time of death is estimated between September 23 and September 25, 1988. The body too decomposed to narrow the window further. Toxicology results show no drugs or alcohol in Matthew's system at the time of death. He was sober, aware, and then he was executed with a bullet to the back of the head. Ellen Chase receives the news at 2:15 p.m. on February 18th. Detective Bosch makes the call personally, his voice careful and low. Mrs. Chase, we found your son. I'm very sorry. He's deceased. There is a long silence on the line. Then Ellen's voice, barely a whisper. How? Gunshot wound. It would have been quick. He didn't suffer long. Another silence. Bosch hears her breathing, shallow, shaking. Then, do you know who did it? Not yet, Bosch says. But I'm going to find out. Ellen Chase hangs up without another word. Later, Derek describes her as collapsing onto the couch, staring at the wall for 3 hours without speaking, the phone still in her hand. The Los Angeles Times runs the story on February 20th. Page B3. Missing man found dead in San Gabriel Mountains. The article is 6 paragraphs, factual and cold. Matthew Chase, 22. Missing since September 1988. Body discovered by surveyor, cause of death homicide, investigation ongoing. The stocky man from the ATM footage is mentioned briefly. Police seek to identify a person of interest seen with Chase on the night of his disappearance. The public's attention, briefly refocused, fades again within days. This is Los Angeles in 1989. The homicide rate is climbing toward 1,000 murders per year. Matthew Chase becomes one more statistic, one more case file, one more family grieving in private. But Detective Raymond Bosch does not move on. He tapes the ATM surveillance still image to the wall above his desk. The stocky man in the dark jacket, face hidden, hand on Matthew's shoulder. Bosch stares at that image every day for the next month, searching for details he might have missed, clues embedded in the pixels and grain. I'll find you, Bosch says to the photograph. I don't know your name yet, but I'll find you. The investigation officially is now a homicide. The stakes are higher. The urgency is greater. But the leads, frustratingly, remain the same. A 43-second surveillance video, a dead body in the mountains, and a faceless killer who vanished into the city like smoke. The investigation into Matthew Chase's murder enters its intensive forensic phase in late February 1989. Detective Bosch establishes a case command center at Wilshire Station, a corner of the Detective Bureau where he pins maps, photographs, timelines, and evidence logs to a large corkboard. The board becomes his obsession. On February 23rd, the physical evidence from the Azusa crime scene arrives at the LAPD's Scientific Investigation Division, SID. The items are cataloged and sealed in plastic evidence bags. Item 1A. Blue denim jeans, size 32 by 34, heavily decomposed, soil and insect contamination present. Item 1B. White cotton t-shirt, size medium, torn and stained, similar decomposition. Item 1C. Single athletic shoe, Nike brand, size 10, left foot. Item 1D. Key ring with single brass key, minimal corrosion. Item 2. Soil samples from beneath the body, collected in sterile containers. Item 3. Vegetation samples from surrounding bushes, labeled by location. Item 4. Skeletal remains, complete except for right foot bones and 3-finger phalanges. What the evidence does not include: a weapon, a bullet, a wallet, an ATM card, or any item belonging to the killer. Forensic technician Laura Hoffman, 29, assigned to process the clothing, spreads the jeans and shirt on a sterile examination table under bright halogen lights. She works methodically, using tweezers and UV light, searching for trace evidence: fibers, hairs, fingerprints, anything that might connect to the killer. The results are discouraging. Fiber analysis: 14 different fiber types recovered from the clothing. 3 are consistent with the interior of a vehicle, automotive carpet fibers, synthetic, but the types are generic, found in thousands of cars manufactured in the 1980s. No unique match possible. Hair analysis: 7 hairs recovered. 5 are consistent with Matthew Chase's hair. 2 are animal hairs, likely coyote or fox, consistent with postmortem scavenging. 0 hairs from the perpetrator. Fingerprint analysis: no usable prints. The decomposition process and environmental exposure have degraded any latent prints that might have existed on the clothing or key. Hoffman writes in her report, evidence consistent with victim being transported in a vehicle and deposited at a remote location. No identifying characteristics linking to a specific suspect or vehicle recovered. Detective Bosch reads the report at his desk, a cold cup of coffee forgotten at his elbow. He underlines the phrase "no identifying characteristics" twice, heavily, the pen tearing the paper. Another dead end. The ATM surveillance footage, meanwhile, undergoes further analysis. On March 2nd, Bosch delivers the VHS tape to the FBI's Los Angeles field office, hoping their advanced image enhancement technology might reveal details invisible to the naked eye or LAPD's equipment. FBI technical agent Mark Delaney spends 6 hours with the footage, using a Quantel Harriet digital image processor, cutting-edge technology in 1989, capable of enhancing resolution and isolating specific image areas. Delaney focuses on the stocky man's face, trying to lift the shadows, sharpen the blur, expose features beneath the baseball cap's brim. The enhanced images reveal height estimate: approximately 5 feet 9 inches based on comparison to ATM dimensions. Verified height: 4 feet 8 inches from ground to top of machine. Weight estimate: 200 to 220 pounds. Muscular build: broad shoulders. Clothing details: dark blue bomber-style jacket, possibly leather or nylon. No visible logos or patches. Blue jeans. Baseball cap with curved brim. No visible team logo. Shoes: dark athletic shoes, generic style. Visible skin: partial view of right hand. Appears to show dark skin tone, possibly Hispanic or African American, though image quality makes certainty impossible. Facial features: none. The angle, lighting, and cap brim completely obscure the face in every frame. Agent Delaney writes, subject appears to deliberately avoid direct camera exposure. Positioning suggests awareness of surveillance and intentional evasion. The enhanced images are circulated to LAPD patrol officers, printed in bulletins, shown on local news segments. The bulletin reads, wanted for questioning in homicide. Male, Hispanic or black, 5 feet 9 inches, 200 to 220 pounds. Stocky build, seen with victim on September 23, 1988. Considered armed and dangerous. The bulletin generates 71 calls to the tip line over the next 2 weeks. Detectives follow up on each one. 68 are misidentifications, people naming ex-boyfriends, neighbors they don't trust, men who vaguely match the description. 3 are worth investigating. Carlos Mendez, 34, is brought in for questioning on March 8 after his ex-girlfriend calls the tip line, saying he matches the description and has a violent temper. Mendez is stocky, 5 feet 8 inches, Hispanic, approximately 210 pounds. He lives in East Los Angeles and works as a warehouse foreman. Detective Bosch conducts the interview in Room 3 of the Wilshire Station Detective Bureau, a windowless space with a metal table, 3 chairs, and a one-way mirror. The interview begins at 2:15 p.m. Mr. Mendez, where were you on the evening of September 23, 1988? Bosch asks. Mendez leans back, arms crossed. That was 6 months ago, man. How am I supposed to remember? Think carefully. It was a Friday night. Mendez considers. Friday nights, I usually play cards with my brother and some guys from work. We've been doing it for years. Can anyone verify that? Yeah, my brother. My friends. We play at a house in Boyle Heights. I can give you names. Bosch writes down the names. Over the next 3 days, detectives interview Mendez's brother and 4 other men. All confirm Carlos Mendez was at a card game in Boyle Heights from approximately 7 p.m. until after midnight on September 23, 1988. 6 independent witnesses, consistent stories, no reason to lie. Mendez is asked to provide fingerprints for comparison. He complies. The prints are compared to partial prints recovered from Matthew's apartment and the ATM keypad. No match. On March 12, Carlos Mendez is cleared and released. Sorry for the inconvenience, Bosch says. Mendez just shakes his head and walks out. Jerome Williams, 28, African-American, 5 feet 10 inches, 205 pounds, is questioned on March 14. A patrol officer spotted him in the Miracle Mile area and thought he resembled the surveillance image. Williams has a prior arrest record. Robbery in 1984, served 18 months, released on parole in 1986. Bosch brings Williams into the interview room at 9:30 a.m. Williams sits calmly, hands folded on the table. I didn't do nothing, he says before Bosch even asks a question. Where were you on September 23, 1988? Around 10 p.m.? At home. I live with my mother in Inglewood. I don't go out much, parole restrictions. Can your mother verify that? She was at work. Night shift nurse at Centinela Hospital. But I was home. I watch TV, go to bed early. That's my life now. Bosch checks Williams' parole records. His parole officer, David Chun, confirms Williams has been compliant. Regular check-ins, no violations, maintained employment at a fast food restaurant. Chun says, Jerome's been clean. I'd be surprised if he's involved in something. Bosch requests fingerprint and DNA samples. Williams provides both. Fingerprints, no match to any evidence. DNA. In 1989, DNA analysis is still limited and time-consuming, but a sample is collected and sent to the California Department of Justice lab for processing. Results return on April 3. No match to any biological evidence recovered from Matthew's clothing. Additionally, Williams' employment records show he clocked in at McDonald's on Western Avenue at 3 p.m. on September 23 and clocked out at 11:17 p.m. He was at work during the critical hours when Matthew was last seen. Jerome Williams is cleared on April 5. Eduardo Ruiz, 31, Hispanic, 5 feet 9 inches, 215 pounds, comes to detectives' attention on March 20th when a parole officer from the California Department of Corrections contacts the LAPD. Ruiz was recently released from Folsom State Prison in August 1988, having served 6 years for armed robbery. He was paroled to Los Angeles and has been living in a halfway house in Koreatown, less than a mile from Matthew Chase's apartment. Detective Bosch and his partner, Detective Linda Vasquez, interview Ruiz on March 21st at 4 p.m. Ruiz is muscular, heavily tattooed, with a shaved head and a cold stare. He sits with his arms crossed, radiating hostility. Where were you on September 23, 1988? Bosch asks. I don't remember, Ruiz says flatly. Were you in the Miracle Mile area that night? I don't know. Maybe. I go all over. Do you know Matthew Chase? Bosch slides the graduation photo across the table. Ruiz glances at it, then looks away. Never seen him. We have surveillance footage of a man matching your description with Matthew Chase at an ATM the night he disappeared. Ruiz shrugs. Lots of guys look like me. The interview continues for 90 minutes. Ruiz provides no alibi, shows no emotion, answers most questions with, I don't remember or, I don't know. Detectives take his fingerprints and a DNA sample. Fingerprint results. No match. DNA results, returned May 1st, no match. Detectives dig deeper into Ruiz's background. They interview his parole officer, his halfway house roommates, employers. Ruiz has no known connection to Matthew Chase, different neighborhoods, different social circles, different demographics. There is no evidence linking Ruiz to the crime beyond a superficial physical resemblance to the man in the surveillance footage. On May 8th, Eduardo Ruiz is also cleared due to lack of evidence. By late May 1989, Detective Bosch has interviewed 17 persons of interest. None have panned out. The forensic evidence leads nowhere. The surveillance footage, analyzed frame by the FBI, the LAPD, and independent consultants, yields no new information. Bosch sits in his car outside the Bank of America on Wilshire Boulevard on the evening of May 19th. It is 9:47 p.m. Exactly 8 months since Matthew Chase stood at this ATM. Bosch watches people come and go, swiping cards, withdrawing cash, living their oblivious lives. The stocky man could be any one of them, or none of them. He could be dead. He could have fled Los Angeles. He could be standing right here, invisible in plain sight. Bosch writes in his notebook, "All leads exhausted. No forensic evidence linking to specific suspect. Surveillance footage insufficient for ID. Case status: active, but stalled." The word he doesn't write, but knows cold. Summer 1989 bleeds into fall, and the investigation into Matthew Chase's murder loses momentum. Detective Raymond Bosch continues to work the case, filing reports, reviewing evidence, chasing faint leads, but the reality settles over him like dust. Without new information, the case will not be solved. On September 23, 1989, exactly 1 year after Matthew disappeared, Ellen Chase drives from Bakersfield to Azusa. She parks on the dirt fire road near where her son's body was found and walks into the scrubland. The manzanita bushes have grown denser. The yellow police tape is long gone, blown away by wind. Ellen kneels at the spot, now unmarked and indistinguishable from the surrounding wilderness, and places a bouquet of white carnations on the dry earth. She stays for an hour, crying silently, talking to the wind. "I don't understand," she whispers. "I don't understand why." The mountains offer no answers. In October 1989, the Los Angeles Police Department officially reclassifies the Matthew Chase homicide as a cold case. The file, now 3 inches thick with reports, photographs, witness statements, forensic analyses, is transferred from Detective Bosch's active caseload to the cold case archive in the Records and Identification Division basement. The file is labeled Chase, Matthew Homicide 89-0247 status. /unsolved and stored on a gray metal shelf among hundreds of other unsolved cases. Each one a story of violence unresolved, justice delayed, families still waiting. Detective Bosch is reassigned to new cases. He investigates a double homicide in Hancock Park, a gang shooting in Mid-Wilty, a domestic violence murder in Echo Park. The work never stops. Los Angeles bleeds, and detectives staunch the wounds as best they can, knowing most will scar, some will fester, and a few will heal. But Bosch does not forget Matthew Chase. He keeps the ATM surveillance still photo in his desk drawer, beneath the case files for active investigations. On slow afternoons, he pulls it out and studies the stocky man's half-visible form, searching for something he might have missed. In his notebook, Bosch maintains a separate page titled Chase, Unanswered Questions. How did the killer know Matthew's PIN? Where was Matthew between 7:34 p.m., phone call, and 9:47 p.m., ATM? What was the nature of their interaction? Robbery? Random violence? Targeted hit? How did the killer transport Matthew to Azusa? Vehicle type? Alone or with accomplices? Why execute him? Why not just rob and release? Where is the murder weapon? These questions remain unanswered. Bosch knows they may never be answered, but he cannot let them go. 1990. January brings heavy rains to Los Angeles. The city floods. Streets become rivers. Hillsides collapse. Mudslides bury homes. The LAPD is overwhelmed with emergency calls, traffic accidents, evacuations. Cold cases are forgotten in the deluge. Ellen Chase calls Wilshire Station every month, asking if there are any updates. The answer is always the same: no, ma'am. The investigation is ongoing, but we have no new leads at this time. By June, she stops calling. Not because she has given up hope, but because the hope has been worn down to a nub too painful to keep touching. Derek Chase moves out of the Koreatown apartment. He cannot live there anymore. Every corner reminds him of Matthew. He rents a studio in Glendale, boxes up Matthew's belongings, stores them in their mother's garage in Bakersfield. The boxes sit gathering dust, a preserved archive of a life cut short. Clothing, a toolbox, auto repair manuals, a cassette tape collection, a framed photograph of the Chase family taken at Christmas 1985 when everyone was still together and alive. 1993. Detective Raymond Bosch is promoted to Detective 3 and transferred to the LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division downtown. He handles high-profile cases now: serial murders, organized crime hits, politically sensitive investigations. The work is intense, prestigious, exhausting. Before leaving Wilshire Station, Bosch makes a final entry in the Matthew Chase case file. All investigative avenues pursued and exhausted as of this date. No viable suspects. Case remains open pending new evidence. Recommend review by Cold Case Unit in future. He signs his name, dates the entry June 14, 1993, and places the file in the Cold Case archive. As he walks out of Wilshire Station for the last time, he thinks of Matthew Chase. 22 years old, working an honest job, saving money, planning to visit his mother for Thanksgiving. He thinks of the stocky man at the ATM, hand on Matthew's shoulder, face forever hidden. "I'm sorry," Bosch whispers, though no one is there to hear. 1998. 10 years after Matthew's murder, the case file is transferred to the LAPD's newly established Cold Case Homicide Unit, formed in response to advances in forensic DNA technology. The unit is staffed by detectives who specialize in reviewing old cases, applying modern techniques to evidence that was untestable or poorly understood in previous decades. Detective Angela Reyes, 36, is assigned to review the Matthew Chase file. She spends a week reading reports, studying photographs, watching the ATM surveillance footage dozens of times. She notes that DNA evidence was collected but yielded no matches in 1989. She requests the evidence be retested using modern STR, short tandem repeat, DNA analysis, which is more sensitive and precise than the methods available in 1989. On August 12, 1998, the California Department of Justice lab retests biological samples from Matthew's clothing. The results return negative. No DNA from a second party is detected. The samples are too degraded, too contaminated by environmental exposure, or there was simply never enough material to analyze. Detective Reyes writes in her report, "Case review completed. No new investigative leads identified. DNA retesting yielded negative results. Recommend case remain in cold case status, pending further advances in forensic technology or new witness information." The file goes back on the shelf. 2003. 15 years after the murder, Ellen Chase is 68 years old. She suffers a minor stroke in March and spends 2 weeks in the hospital. Her daughter, Matthew's younger sister Jennifer, now 33 and living in Sacramento with 2 children of her own, visits frequently. Ellen has not spoken about Matthew in years. The grief has been folded up and stored away in a place too deep and painful to access regularly. But on September 23, 2003, the 15th anniversary of Matthew's disappearance, Ellen makes the drive from Bakersfield to Azusa one more time. She is slower now, walks with a cane, but she climbs out to the manzanita bushes and places white carnations on the earth. "I still don't understand," she says aloud. "But I hope you're at peace, sweetheart." She returns to her car and drives home. It is the last time she will visit the site. The drive is too far, her health too fragile. 2008. 20 years after Matthew Chase was murdered, Detective Raymond Bosch retires from the LAPD after 38 years of service. He is 58, gray-haired, carrying the weight of 1,000 cases and 100 unsolved mysteries. At his retirement party, colleagues toast him, tell stories, present him with a plaque. That night, alone in his apartment, Bosch opens his personal files. A cardboard box he has kept through 5 different addresses, containing notes and photographs from cases he could never let go. Near the bottom, he finds the ATM surveillance photo of Matthew Chase and the stocky man. Bosch stares at it for a long time. Then he writes on the back, "I'm sorry I couldn't find you. I tried. R. Bosch 2008. He places the photo back in the box, seals it, and stores it in his closet. He tells himself he is done. But he knows, deep down, that some cases never close. They just become part of you, carried forever. 2013. 25 years after the murder, the LAPD's cold case unit undergoes reorganization. New detectives are brought in. Old files are digitized and entered into a database. The Matthew Chase case file is scanned page by page, converted to PDF, tagged with keywords: homicide, ATM, surveillance, unsolved, 1988. A young detective named Marcus Wu, 29, reviews the digital file as part of a training exercise. He watches the surveillance footage on his computer screen, the grainy images flickering. He reads Detective Bosch's meticulous notes, Detective Rhea's review from 1998. Wu writes a memo. Case remains unsolved. Advances in forensic genealogy may provide future investigative opportunities. Recommend retaining biological evidence for potential future testing. The memo is filed. The case remains cold. 2015. Ellen Chase dies peacefully in her sleep on November 3, 2015, at the age of 80. She is buried in Bakersfield next to her husband, who passed away in 1995. The funeral is small family and a few old friends. Jennifer delivers the eulogy, mentioning her brother Matthew briefly. Mom never stopped loving him. She never stopped hoping for answers. Derek Chase, now 54, stands at the grave and thinks about the brother who vanished from his life 27 years ago. He has not thought about Matthew in months. Life moves on, memory fades, grief becomes manageable. But standing at his mother's grave, he feels the old ache return. After the funeral, Derek drives to the LAPD's cold case unit office downtown. He asks to speak to someone about Matthew Chase's case. A detective named Sarah Lim meets with him briefly. "Is there anything new?" Derek asks. "No, sir. I'm sorry. The case is still open, but we have no active leads." Derek nods. He knew the answer before he asked. "Thank you for trying," he says and leaves. He does not return. 2018. 30 years after Matthew Chase's murder, the case file sits in a climate-controlled evidence storage facility in Piper Tech, a secure LAPD warehouse that houses cold case evidence from decades past. The biological samples collected in 1989, swabs from Matthew's clothing, soil samples, preserved fibers, are stored in sealed plastic containers, labeled and cataloged, waiting. By 2018, forensic genealogy has revolutionized cold case investigations. DNA samples once considered too degraded or too small for analysis can now be sequenced using next-generation techniques. Public genealogy databases like GEDmatch allow investigators to upload DNA profiles and search for familial matches, building genetic family trees that can lead to suspects. The breakthrough that eluded detectives for 30 years is, finally, within reach. But no one is actively working the Matthew Chase case. The file sits unreviewed, untouched, gathering digital dust in a database. There are too many cold cases, too few detectives, too many newer tragedies demanding attention. Until, in late 2018, something changes. On October 15, 2018, the Los Angeles Police Department announces the formation of a new initiative, the Cold Case Task Force, a specialized unit dedicated to applying advanced forensic genealogy techniques to unsolved homicides from the 1980s and 1990s. The task force is funded by a California state grant and staffed by 4 detectives, 2 forensic analysts, and a genealogy specialist. Detective Vanessa Cortez, 41, is appointed to lead the task force. Cortez is a 20-year veteran of the LAPD, with extensive experience in DNA analysis and cold case investigations. She has followed the recent successes of forensic genealogy closely. The Golden State Killer case in April 2018, solved after 40 years using DNA and family trees, ignited hope that other cold cases might finally be resolved. Cortez and her team begin by reviewing the LAPD's database of unsolved homicides, prioritizing cases that meet specific criteria. Biological evidence collected and preserved. Case went cold due to lack of suspect identification, not lack of evidence. Family members still living and seeking closure. Victims with no criminal background to ensure public sympathy and media support. On November 2, 2018, Detective Cortez pulls up the digital file for Chase Matthew Homicide 89-0247. She reads Detective Bosch's original investigation, reviews the evidence logs, watches the ATM surveillance footage. She notes that biological samples were collected from Matthew's clothing in 1989 and retested in 1998 with negative results. But Cortez knows that negative results in 1998 does not mean no DNA present. It means the technology of 1998 could not extract usable profiles from degraded samples. The technology of 2018 is far more advanced. On November 8, Cortez drives to the Piper Tech Evidence Facility and requests the Matthew Chase evidence containers. A technician retrieves them from cold storage, 3 sealed boxes labeled Chase 89-0247. Clothing, biological samples, miscellaneous. Cortez signs the chain of custody forms and transports the boxes to the LAPD's forensic laboratory. Forensic analyst Dr. Kim Patel, 34, opens the containers in a sterile examination room. Inside the biological samples box, sealed in plastic tubes, are the swabs taken from Matthew's jeans and shirt in 1989, 3 decades old, preserved in a dark, temperature-controlled environment. Let's see what we can find, Dr. Patel says. The DNA extraction process begins on November 12. Dr. Patel uses a technique called whole genome amplification, which can generate millions of copies of DNA from just a few degraded cells. The process is delicate, time-consuming, and expensive, but it works. Over the next 2 weeks, Dr. Patel isolates genetic material from the swabs. Under the microscope, the DNA appears as faint, fragmented strands, damaged by 30 years of age but still intact enough to sequence. On November 27th, the sequencing is complete. Dr. Patel uploads the genetic profile into the FBI's CODIS database, which contains DNA profiles from convicted offenders, arrestees, and forensic evidence from unsolved crimes. No match. Cortez is not surprised. CODIS is limited. It only contains profiles from individuals who have been arrested or convicted. The stocky man from the ATM may have no criminal record, or may have avoided arrest his entire life. But Cortez has another tool, forensic genealogy. On December 3, 2018, Cortez uploads the DNA profile to GEDmatch, a public genealogy database containing profiles from over 1.2 million users who have voluntarily submitted their genetic data to trace ancestry and find relatives. GEDmatch allows law enforcement to search for familial matches, individuals who share portions of DNA with the unknown suspect, indicating they are related through a common ancestor. The search runs overnight. On the morning of December 4th, results appear. 34 potential relatives identified, ranging from 0.8% to 3.2% genetic similarity. This means the DNA from Matthew's clothing shares ancestry with 34 people in the database: distant cousins, second cousins once removed, third cousins. None are close enough to be immediate family, but all are connected through bloodlines that stretch back generations. Cortez contacts Barbara Raventer, a renowned forensic genealogist who helped solve the Golden State Killer case. Raventer agrees to consult on the Matthew Chase investigation. Over the next 3 months, Raventer and her team build a genetic family tree, using the GEDmatch results as starting points. They trace birth records, marriage certificates, census data, obituaries, and social media profiles, constructing a vast genealogical web that spans 4 generations and over 200 individuals. The process is painstaking. Each branch of the tree must be researched, verified, and documented. Dead ends are frequent. Records are missing, names are misspelled, families moved and disappeared from official documentation. But slowly, the tree takes shape. By March 2019, Raventer has identified a common ancestor: Juan Misa, born 1892 in the Philippines, immigrated to the United States in 1923, settled in Los Angeles, died 1964. Juan Misa had 7 children, who had dozens of grandchildren, who had hundreds of great-grandchildren. The genetic profile from Matthew's clothing belongs to one of Juan Misa's descendants. On March 18, 2019, Raventer narrows the tree to 17 male descendants of Juan Misa who meet the criteria, born between 1955 and 1975, making them approximately 20 to 40 years old in 1988. Lived in or near Los Angeles in 1988. Physical description consistent with the stocky man in the surveillance footage. Detective Cortez and her team begin investigating each of these 17 individuals. They obtain driver's license photos, employment records, criminal histories, and current addresses. They conduct background checks, interview family members, and cross-reference locations. On April 2, 2019, one name emerges as a strong candidate. David Misa, born July 14, 1964, in Los Angeles. Nickname, Bear. David Misa's driver's license photo from 1987 shows a stocky man, approximately 5 feet 9 inches, with a broad face, dark hair, and a muscular build. In 1988, he was 24 years old and living in the mid-city area of Los Angeles, less than 2 miles from the Bank of America ATM where Matthew Chase was last seen. Cortez runs David Misa's name through the LAPD's database. A criminal record appears. 1982. Arrested for petty theft, charges dismissed. 1985. Arrested for assault with a deadly weapon, pleaded to lesser charge, served 6 months in county jail. 1986. Arrested for possession of a controlled substance, charges dropped due to illegal search. 1987. Arrested for armed robbery, charges filed, case pending at time of Matthew Chase's murder. David Bear Misa was a known criminal, affiliated with a local gang operating in the mid-city area. According to LAPD gang intelligence files, Misa was suspected of involvement in multiple violent crimes, including armed robbery, assault, and possibly murder for hire, though he was never convicted of homicide. Detective Cortez pulls Misa's case files and reads carefully. On September 27, 1988, 4 days after Matthew Chase disappeared, David Misa was found dead, shot multiple times in a gang-related killing in South Los Angeles. His murder was never solved. He was 24 years old. Cortez sits back in her chair, staring at the computer screen. "He's been dead for 30 years, she says aloud. "We've been hunting a ghost." But Cortez knows she cannot close the case based on genealogy alone. She needs definitive proof, DNA confirmation that David Misa was the stocky man at the ATM, the man who used Matthew Chase's ATM card, the man who killed him. On April 9, 2019, Cortez contacts the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's office and requests access to David Misa's autopsy file and biological samples. Misa's body was autopsied in 1988, and tissue samples were preserved according to standard protocol. The samples still exist, stored in the coroner's archives. On April 15th, Cortez obtains a court order to extract DNA from David Misa's preserved tissue samples for comparison to the DNA profile from Matthew Chase's clothing. Dr. Patel performs the extraction and sequencing. On April 22nd, the results are complete. DNA match. 99.97% probability that the DNA from Matthew Chase's clothing belongs to David Bear Misa. Cortez reads the report 3 times, making sure she understands. The stocky man at the ATM, the man who walked away with Matthew, who used his ATM card, who executed him with a bullet to the back of the head, was David Misa. The genetic family tree was correct. The forensic genealogy worked. But David Misa has been dead since 1988. He will never stand trial. He will never be questioned, never confess, never face Matthew Chase's family in court. Justice, in this case, is incomplete. On May 6, 2019, Detective Vanessa Cortez arranges a meeting with the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Present are Deputy District Attorney Michael Herrera, LAPD Captain James Rollins, and Detective Cortez's supervisor, Lieutenant Aaron Walsh. Cortez presents the evidence. The surveillance footage, the forensic genealogy, the DNA match, David Misa's criminal history. She lays out the timeline. Matthew Chase's disappearance on September 23rd. Misa's death on September 27th, just 4 days later. We have the killer, Cortez says. But he's been dead for 31 years. Deputy DA Herrera reviews the evidence carefully. This is solid work, detective. The DNA match is conclusive. But legally, we have a problem. You can't prosecute a dead man. I know, Cortez says. But we can still clear the case. Herrera nods. Under California law, a case can be cleared by exceptional means if the suspect is deceased, and there is sufficient evidence to charge them had they been alive. Based on what you've shown me, this qualifies. Captain Rollins asks, what about motive? Do we know why Misa killed Matthew Chase? Cortez shakes her head. We may never know. Misa was a career criminal, affiliated with gangs, suspected of multiple violent crimes. Matthew had no gang connections, no criminal background. My theory is that Misa approached Matthew at the ATM intending to rob him, forced him to withdraw money, then killed him to eliminate the witness. It was probably opportunistic, wrong place, wrong time. Any evidence linking them before that night? None. As far as we can determine, they had no prior relationship. Matthew was a working-class kid from Bakersfield trying to make a life in Los Angeles. Misa was a violent criminal. Their worlds intersected for 43 seconds at an ATM, and it cost Matthew his life. Lieutenant Walsh speaks up. What about Misa's murder? Was it related? Cortez pulls up another file. Misa was killed in a gang shooting 4 days after Matthew disappeared. 2 suspects were identified but never charged. Witnesses refused to cooperate. His murder is also technically unsolved, though gang intelligence suggests it was retaliation for a drug deal gone bad. Completely unrelated to the Matthew Chase case. Herrera closes the file. All right, we'll prepare a recommendation to clear the case by exceptional means. The family should be notified before we make any public announcement. Cortez nods. I'll contact Derek Chase. On May 10, 2019, Detective Cortez calls Derek Chase. He is 58 years old now, living in Glendale, working as a manager at a printing company. He has not thought about his brother's murder in several years. Life has continued, scars have formed. The acute pain has dulled to a distant ache. Mr. Chase, this is Detective Vanessa Cortez with the LAPD Cold Case Task Force. I'm calling about your brother, Matthew. Derek's heart clenches. Did you find something? Yes, sir. We've identified the person responsible for your brother's death. There is a long silence. Derek's voice, when it comes, is shaking. Who? His name was David Misa. He was a gang member, 24 years old at the time. We identified him through advanced DNA analysis and forensic genealogy. Mr. Misa was killed 4 days after your brother disappeared, in an unrelated gang shooting. He's been dead for 31 years. Derek exhales slowly, a sound like air leaking from a tire. So there won't be a trial. No, sir, but the case will be officially cleared. We're issuing an arrest warrant posthumously, and the district attorney is closing the case by exceptional means. Your brother's killer has been identified with certainty. Another long silence. Then Derek says, quietly, my mother never knew. She died 4 years ago, still wondering. I'm very sorry, Cortez says, but I want you to know your brother didn't die because of anything he did. It wasn't his fault. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he encountered a violent criminal. Matthew did nothing wrong. Derek's voice cracks. Thank you. Thank you for not giving up. We never closed the case, Cortez says. It just took 31 years to find the answer. On May 14, 2019, the Los Angeles Police Department holds a press conference. Detective Cortez stands at a podium, flanked by Captain Rollins and Deputy DA Herrera. Behind them, on a large screen, is the surveillance still image from 1988. Matthew Chase at the ATM, the stocky man's hand on his shoulder. Cortez speaks clearly and without emotion. On September 23, 1988, 22-year-old Matthew Chase was abducted and murdered. For 31 years, his case remained unsolved. Today, I am here to announce that we have identified the person responsible. The room fills with the clicking of cameras, the rustling of reporters' notebooks. Using advanced forensic genealogy and DNA analysis, we have conclusively identified the suspect as David Misa, also known as Bear, a gang member who was 24 years old at the time of the murder. Mr. Misa is deceased. He was killed in an unrelated gang shooting on September 27, 1988, just 4 days after Matthew's disappearance. An arrest warrant has been issued posthumously, and the case has been cleared by exceptional means. A reporter asks, "What was the motive?" "We believe it was a robbery that escalated to murder. Mr. Misa forced Matthew to withdraw money from an ATM, then killed him to eliminate the witness. There is no evidence of any prior relationship between the victim and the suspect." Another reporter, "Why did it take 31 years? The technology to identify suspects through forensic genealogy did not exist in 1988, Cortez explains. The investigation was thorough, but we lacked the tools to connect the DNA evidence to a suspect. Those tools are now available, and we are applying them to other cold cases as well. What about justice for the family? Cortez pauses. Justice is complicated in this case. The suspect will never stand trial. But the family now has answers. They know who killed Matthew, and they know it wasn't their fault. Sometimes, that's the only justice we can provide. The press conference airs on local news that evening. The story is picked up by national outlets CNN, NBC, The New York Times. The headline reads, 30-year-old cold case solved through forensic genealogy. Suspect dead since 1988. Public reaction is mixed. Some express relief that the case is solved. Others express frustration that the killer never faced justice. Online commenters debate the ethics of forensic genealogy, privacy concerns, the use of public databases for law enforcement purposes. Derek Chase does not watch the press conference. He sits alone in his apartment, holding a photograph of Matthew from 1987. His brother smiling, young, alive, unaware that he has less than a year to live. Derek whispers, "We know now, Matt. We finally know." On June 1, 2019, Derek Chase drives to Azusa for the first time in over a decade. He parks on the dirt fire road, walks into the scrubland, and finds the spot where Matthew's body was discovered in 1989. The manzanita bushes are tall now, thick and wild. There is no marker, no memorial, just earth and plants and sky. Derek kneels and places a bouquet of white carnations on the ground. He sits for a long time, listening to the wind, the distant hum of traffic on State Route 39, the rustle of leaves. "They found him, Matt," Derek says aloud. "The guy who did this. His name was David Misa. He's dead. He died 4 days after you. I don't know if that's justice, but it's something." The wind carries his words away. Derek thinks about his mother, who spent 27 years waiting for answers she never received. He thinks about Detective Bosch, who worked the case for years and retired without solving it. He thinks about Detective Cortez, who refused to let the case die, who used new science to reach back across 3 decades and name the killer. Technology caught up to him, Derek says. It just took 31 years. He stays at the site for 2 hours, then returns to his car and drives back to Los Angeles. He does not plan to return. Closure, he realizes, is not found in places or rituals. It is found in knowing. And now, finally, he knows. Detective Vanessa Cortez returns to the LAPD Cold Case Task Force office and places the Matthew Chase file in the cleared/closed cabinet. The file is thick, 31 years of investigation, reports, DNA analyses, genealogical trees. She writes the final entry, case cleared by exceptional means on May 14, 2019. Suspect identified as David Misa, DOD September 27, 1988. DNA match confirmed at 99.97% probability. Family notified. Arrest warrant issued posthumously. Investigation complete. She signs her name, dates the entry, and closes the file. Cortez leans back in her chair and thinks about Raymond Bosch, the original detective, now 69 years old and living in retirement somewhere in Arizona. She considers calling him, telling him the case is solved, that his work was not in vain. But she decides against it. Bosch carried this case for years. He deserves peace, not the reminder of a ghost finally named. Instead, Cortez moves on to the next cold case file on her desk. There are hundreds more waiting. Other families still wondering, other killers still unnamed, other stories demanding resolution. The work never stops. On September 23, 2019, exactly 31 years after Matthew Chase disappeared, Derek Chase sits in his apartment and lights a candle. He does this every year, a private ritual. But this year is different. This year he has answers. He thinks about the night of September 23, 1988. Matthew leaving for work that morning, calling their mother from a payphone, standing at an ATM while a stranger approached. 43 seconds captured on camera. A lifetime erased in hours. Derek thinks about David Bear Misa, a man he will never meet, a man who has been dead for 31 years. He wonders what Misa thought in those final moments of his own life, gunned down in a gang shooting 4 days after killing Matthew. Did he think about Matthew? Did he feel remorse? Did he die without ever knowing his DNA would one day travel through time and name him as a murderer? Derek will never know. Some questions have no answers. But one question, the central, aching question that haunted his family for 3 decades, finally does. What happened to Matthew Chase? He was approached by a violent criminal at an ATM. He was robbed. He was forced into a vehicle. He was driven to the mountains. He was executed with a bullet to the back of the head. His body was left in the scrubland, where it lay undiscovered for 5 months. And the man who did it, David Misa, age 24, gang member, career criminal, was killed 4 days later, carrying Matthew's blood on his hands into the grave. Derek blows out the candle. The smoke rises, dissipates, and is gone. Justice, he thinks, is a strange, incomplete thing. But it is something, and sometimes something is enough. In the San Gabriel Mountains, the manzanita bushes grow thick and wild, their roots sinking deep into the earth where Matthew Chase once lay. The wind blows across the scrubland, carrying whispers of the past, stories of violence and loss, of families who wait, of detectives who refuse to give up, of science reaching across decades to name the dead. Matthew Chase was 22 years old when he died. He wanted to visit his mother for Thanksgiving. He fixed cars. He saved money. He was careful, responsible, kind. His killer has been dead for 31 years. But his name, David Misa, Bear, is now recorded in the files, spoken aloud, known. The case is closed. The family has answers. The ghost finally has a name. And in the desert wind, there is something that almost sounds like peace.